All right, let's begin today. So let's do a little bit of announcement stuff in terms of this class, and then maybe I'll make some announcements. So first, let's say again. So the final exam is going to be released. Let's just say it's going to be released on the 14th, and it's going to be coding questions and MCQ as usual. So standard format. And it'll be due on the 21st. So that's the last day of finals. So it's important that you get the final exam done on time, because it's not going to really be possible to extend beyond the end of finals. So here we have a class on the 12th. So we have two more classes after this. We have one on the 10th, and we have one on the 12th, and then the 13th is your study day, which, I mean, in a sense, it's not exceptionally important that you have a study day for this class, because the final exam is going to be open for an entire week. You can choose when to begin, but hopefully your other classes you can use the study day to good effect. So, yep, so the 10th and the 12th are the last 2 days of classes. I'll probably go over, I'm not sure exactly what I'll do. Maybe I'll do some more Flask or Tkinter. So, random topics this day, and then the last day I'll probably do a final exam review, or maybe both of them will be final exam reviews. I'm not 100% sure. The problem, so the issue with this course is that it's really front-end loaded in terms of material, right? So material in this course is really front-end loaded. And then projects and homeworks are back-end loaded. So will everything until this point be on the final? Well, everything except for the stuff that I said explicitly wouldn't be on the final. So if we go over like a list of topics, basically, right? What is our list of topics for the semester, right? So we have, print and input. We have variables, local versus global versus class instance variables. Right, all right, I should just call them instance variables in classes. So understanding the difference between those. Yep. For loops, while loops. For that we get if statements, right? And so if, elif, else, those three things. For loops and while loops, which along with for comes the range object, and maybe len object and lists, right? 1D lists, 2D lists, 3D lists, 4D lists, whatever, right? Really, I mean, it's very unlikely that I'm going to give you anything beyond a 1D list or a 2D list. Yeah, and then the next thing that we talked about in this course, so this is basically a list of all the stuff. These are, this is the way to really understand the course if you're looking for what have we learned this semester? This is what we should have learned this semester. So lists, which are basically arrays in other languages, and then dictionaries and functions. And within functions we have recursion, right? And recursion is probably somewhat hard. So well, I mean, yeah, I'm listing the topics from 201. And then classes, right? Where you have constructors, methods, instance variables, and self. Flask is not going to be on it, right? So special topics like Tkinter, Flask, not on the final, right? And I mean, it would be unfair if I put them on the final. Well, I don't know if it'd be unfair. It's just not really part of the required part of the course. I think it's just something that's interesting. It's not necessarily something that's absolutely essential. So let's that's a good point. So let's post. Where is Discord? I closed Discord. Yes, I did. I think. Let's put up today's lecture. Okay. All right. So let me. Yes, sorting and searching. Sorting will probably make an appearance. If anything, Big O will be on the MCQ. Maybe a few questions. Not so much. Okay? So, Big O is going to be... I'll do some questions on it, but it's not going to be stressed. It will occur, not stressed. Right? And the reason for that is generally that I have figured out that based on multiple semesters with multiple different instructors, the vast majority of Big O type questions that we ask are usually answered in ways that do not make us happy. So, if you know what the answer is going to be and you don't like it, then why are you asking the question? So that's the thing. Okay, so that's I think that's a pretty good list of the course topics. Yeah. So and with functions goes scope. Okay. So I think that's basically a good list of what our final exam is going to be on. Of course, that's a list of everything we've done this semester, but I think it's also good just to write down a list like this and to say, yep, all of these things are definitely going to be final examable. I'm not going to say that every single thing, like, you might not have a question like on every single one of these things, but you will have questions about any one of them, and that is allowed. Okay. So then the last announcement before we get into Flask is that note that I sent out an announcement about the project. And so basically the idea here about the project is that I didn't say it explicitly. I kind of did it in the sample output, but I didn't say it well enough. So I added a section about making factories and making mines. So the answer is, if there's a recipe where the output is factory, literally the string factory, will office hours be available to the last day of the finals? The office hours are probably going to be a little bit iffy during the final exam periods, because if any of the TAs have... Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say that some of the TAs volunteer, I might volunteer, but I'm going to say the office hours are probably going to be a bit iffy after the end of class. I guess I'll be more available on Discord, and I might do some office hours, but just remember that if I do office hours, it'll be something where I will be very easily swarmed, and if I'm swarmed, then I will not really be able to help everybody. So, anyway, yeah, it's unfortunate, isn't it? See, the thing is, like, when we're in person, the one advantage that people have is that when they come to my office and there's 10 other students sitting there already, they get the feeling like, oh yeah, he's he's got a lot of students with him, whereas when it's online, everybody's like, well, why can't the professor help 20, 30, 40 students at a time? The answer is, I can't. I don't have enough clones or bandwidth or whatever. But anyway, let's get back to the project. So for the project, if there's a recipe where the output is factory, literally the string is factory, right? Then that will make new factories. Okay, and so you add them to your factory, and I'm calling it a factory list. You can have it be a factory dictionary, factory, whatever. Hey now. Yeah, so I'm not saying that your factory list needs to be a real list. It can be a dictionary, it can be a class, it can be a group, whatever kind of object you have your factories in, you add it to that, and it's the same thing for mines. So if there's a recipe which outputs mine, right, all in lowercase. So what I'm going to suggest is that all of your recipes should probably just do a dot lower. I promise you, we are not going to make these types of objects. So we're not going to say, here we're going to make a factory object, and then the next object is going to be a factory object, and then the next object is going to be a factory object, and then the next object is going to be a factory object. And so definitely I'm not going to do this, right? And so if you just hit everything with dot lower, I promise you that we will never ever make any recipe. There's never going to be any objects that are just the dot lower or some other dot, none of the strings are going to overlap like this because, technically none of these are equal in Python, but of course you would say, like, I don't want this one to produce factories, right? This one actually makes real factories. This one makes nothing, right? That's just a widget. This one is also widget, and this is also widget, right? So, but this is like widget 3, this is widget 2, this is widget 1, right? So, this is definitely not going to happen. So anyway, so if there's an output which is mine, M-I-N-E, then what you'll do is you'll add a new mine to the list of mines. And of course I use list again in quotation marks. It's definitely however you want to store it. If you want to store it as a dictionary, as a class, as a list, as whatever. So I guess you can't add it to a tuple, so not a tuple, right? Because it's not mutable. But other than that, you basically have any mutable object is your choice. So if there's a recipe which outputs mine, you add a new mine to the list of mines. And remember that mines, the rule for mines is that they can only be set once, and then they're fixed. So basically the mine should have no production at first, and then after... Alright, you two, be good. So anyway, so that's what I want to say about the project. Yeah, okay. I think that's all I really have to say about the project. I added a section that basically says exactly this into the description. So go and read it. It says the same thing. I'm thinking... Oh, yeah, that's the one I'm thinking. I'm thinking of maybe making this part a little bit of extra credit, maybe, if you get this done. But no promises. So I'll decide in the next day or so. So it's perhaps... this may be an extra part of the project. Currently, it's required. It's part of the project. But if I feel like it's too difficult... I mean, I did it, and then I thought, I always think to myself, is it too difficult? Is it reasonable? Is it something... Is it something that I should expect? Is it something that's, I don't know. You know, it's hard for me to always know the answer. Okay, so I think I've spent 15 minutes on announcements, and that's a huge waste of time, other than the fact that probably necessary. So let's get moving on to Flask, okay? So let's talk about Flask. So there are a number of Python modules, right? So there are a number of built-in Python modules. For instance, there's JSON, there's CSV, there's random. What other types of things are there? There's OS, which is strictly forbidden in 201. There's all kinds of stuff, right? Strictly forbidden in 201, but as soon as you get out of 201, remember, there's no class on Python again. Well, there kind of is. There's an advanced Python class, but that's only for non-majors. Pickle. Yeah, so there's... Numpy is not a built-in. Right. So here are all the built-ins. You have future, main, thread, async IO. Oh god, async IO. Well, we're about to get to that. So there's a whole bunch of them, right? Here's a list, right? Okay. But there are also custom, non-built-in, whatever you want to call it, importable packages, and Numpy, and SciPy, or SciPy, or NumPy, or whatever. Those are two examples. So that's if you're doing some data analysis. For instance, if you're doing AI, there's TensorFlow. There's music ones. There's graphical ones for like GUIs. There's like Qt4, Qt5. So Tkinter comes built in, right? So Tkinter comes built in, but there are other graphical packages. Yeah, so there's TensorFlow, PyTorch, you know, all kinds of Keras, etc., 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 right? So I mean, like, there's literally a non-ending supply of them. The one that we're going to talk about, so there's basically two, I would say, industry standard web hosting Python packages, and those are. And the reason why I can basically say that these are the two is that out of like 800 job descriptions that I looked at, basically one or the other, if it's not Ruby on Rails, which is using Ruby, that's a different language, basically if they're in Python, they're either going to be using Flask or they're going to be using Django. And so you might ask, well, why didn't I pick Django? And the answer is Django is hard. Okay? It has a much larger... shall I say, there's a much larger 0 to something gap. Flask is, I would say, it's much more simplified, much easier. It's something you can cover in a single lecture, right? The problem with Django is that if you try to cover it in a single lecture, you'll get some of the stuff done, but you're just not really going to get anything that's kind of interesting. Like, you need a lot of time to cover Django, and I'm not gonna. Maybe I shouldn't say it's hard. It's just larger, and there's a lot more in the 0 to something gap. The advantage of Django, and the reason why it's probably even more popular now than Flask, is because it's way, way, way more powerful, right? There's Flask doesn't do a lot for you, but it will do the minimal stuff. So when I say web hosting, what do I mean by web hosting? Basically what I mean is, if you want to make a website, right, you need two things. One, you need a domain name or or at least some place to put your site. That's not what we're talking about today, right? But then you also need the second thing. You need basically a server, right? And in this case, it's just going to be a program that whenever someone accesses your site, how does it respond, right? How do they get your page? And now, of course, you could say, well, there's built-in stuff. There's a lot of stuff nowadays where you can just pre-build websites. But then how do they do it, right? That's the thing. This is what we're going to be talking about today. This is what Django and Flask do for you. Okay, so the first half of web development is finding the domain name, putting it somewhere at www.something.com, and that's the part that costs money. That's the part that you have to figure out for yourself when you're deciding who you're going to pay to host your website, or if you're going to try to host it on your own server, et cetera, et cetera. Like that's kind of like a business decision, right? That's a money decision. But the actual thing that you want to do is how do you make a website that is kind of responsive, right? So HTML is kind of a website, but it's not really responsive in the sense that there's no server side to HTML, right? HTML is simply kind of a, what is it? It's just kind of a, well, it's the hypertext markup language, right? HTML equals hypertext markup language, which basically just means it's, yeah, you could say it's static. It's more or less static. It's just, and now, of course, you might say, the real important thing about it as well is that it's client-side, right? It's something that once the server sends you the HTML page, your browser renders it. But then the question is, how does it get sent to your browser? So let's talk about Flask. Let's go back and do some let's go and do some stuff. So let's make a little Flask directory. Let's make Flask project. Okay. Now inside of Flask project, we'll make our Flask server. All right. And that's that. You're done, right? Nothing left to do. So let's close a bunch of these. Okay. So now here's the thing. How do you, at least in PyCharm, install packages? So the answer is what you do. Oh, right. Okay, so now that we've done that, how do we install packages? So the answer is what you're going to do is you're going to go to your project, and then you're going to go to the project interpreter, and you see here there's already a ton of stuff installed in here. Is Flask installed? Actually, I think Flask is not. Oh, no, it is. Darn. Oh, well. So, but if it wasn't installed, if it wasn't on this list, so if you go Control-Alt-S, that's the Windows command. I think there's some special Mac button that allows you to do that too, like Command-S or something like that, that brings up all this stuff. You go to the project interpreter, you click on this, and then here's a list of all the registered packages that you can install. It's just a gigantic blob of package lists. So what you're going to do is you're going to type in Flask, and then you will click Install Package. And it'll probably take a bit longer than what it took for me, because my Flask was already installed, so it should probably install successfully, right? But on the other hand, if your Flask doesn't install, then that's something that I'm not going to worry about today. So if you just follow along, like, you'll understand. But if anyway, so this is basically what you need to do to install a package. So the other way to do it is by the command line. You can actually use a command called pip, which is kind of beyond the scope of this course, but we might talk about that maybe next time. Okay, so once you install the package, it should appear on your packages list, and then you can click OK. And so then we can, basically the point is that we should be able to import Flask now. So you could type in import Flask. Nope, not Flask, Flask. There we go. And, oh, I'm sorry. Is it lowercase? It is. There we go. So we can import Flask now. But let me just say the things that we actually want to do. So actually, let's leave it like that for now. Let's do this. So the first thing you need to do is make a Flask app, right? So the first thing you want to do... Now, a Flask app is a class that, that Flask made that allows us to run stuff, right? So here's how simple it is to get a server running. Okay, so what you do is you say if name equals main, like that. Here we're going to say flask.flask, and then here we're going to say, sure. So we can say my first Flask app, okay? That's going to be the name. My app is going to be equal to this. So remember that this is the module name dot class name. So if you don't want to have to do this, what you can do is you can say from Flask import capital Flask. And so then you will say, I don't need the lowercase Flask anymore, I can do that. And then finally, this is as simple as it gets. How do you run your client? You say myapp.run, and then here it says host equals something. And so we're not going to put in a host, it's just we're going to use our local host, meaning every one of your computers is basically a server, okay? And so, so every one of your computers is basically a secret server. It's just not running anything. So now we're going to run something on your computer. And what we're going to do is we're going to specify the port, though. I'm going to specify 1729. You can specify anything you want. The only thing is that you shouldn't specify are, like, I think port 80, not port 80, or I think 480. Those are the HTTP ports for your general internet, so don't use those, but basically anything above 1,000 should be completely fine to use. And I picked 1729 because it's equal to 10 squared plus 9 squared, so there is literally no reason that you need to pick 1729. You can pick 1080, you can pick, any number. I think up to 32,767, right? So ports are between, say, I think it's either 0 or 1. I forget if there's a port 0. Let's just say ports are between 0 and 32,767, right? Yeah, you can pick 1080 if you want. You can pick 1015, right? Whatever. So, okay. You see, basically, it's 2 lines of code after you do the import. Let's run it. Hopefully this works. I haven't run Flask on my computer in a while, so it... okay. So, here we go. I think sometimes what port 80 or 480 will do is while it's running, it'll actually intercept your internet traffic. And so your internet traffic will get funneled into your own personal server. It's just gonna mess up your browser's ability to work properly. So that's why I don't suggest doing it. As soon as you... Yeah, so 10 squared plus 9 squared is 1729. Yeah, let's try... yeah. Anyway, so it looks like it's working. And so now, in order to go there, you see that it says running on 127.0.0.1. So what that is that is your IP address. Or I shouldn't say that's your IP address. That's your, what do they call it? It's like a loopback IP address. So it's an IP address that, it's like an address for your current house, right? It's like if you're going to send something to yourself, that's the address. And so basically what you can do is you can type right into your search bar 127 dot, and you see here it stopped auto-completing. 127.0.0.1, and you see that there's a whole bunch of previous semesters examples here, and then you type in a colon, and you type in 1729, and I don't know, maybe you need to do HTTP : maybe you don't. Let's see what happens if you don't. So it says this URL was not found on the server if you blah 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 blah. But you notice that it wasn't a complete failure, right? Why wasn't it a complete failure? Well, let's look at this. Oh, right. Well, we got some messages, right? So it didn't return anything, but you notice that it's not going to return anything because we haven't told it to return anything. Like, there's nothing there to return. So in its defense, like, that's exactly what we told it to do. But you notice that it actually did try, right? It tried. So let's add something, right? It did its best, right? We can't fault it. It's our fault. So let's add something, right? Let's add a website. So here what we're going to do is we're going to do my app. And I know that this might seem confusing because it's this @ sign. Well, I guess, yeah. The @ sign itself is not the confusing thing. The confusing thing is, like, what the heck is it? And the answer is that it's something called a decorator in Python. And basically, don't ask, okay? They are, I mean, I'd have to do like an entire class just on decorators. It's probably more confusing than recursion in classes put together if I actually explain what it is. Just assume that what's happening is, okay, let's make this display main page. Okay, so now we have a function that's going to display the main page. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to print attempting to render main page. Okay, so now let's rerun our server and see what happens. Now we're not going to, again, it's not going to work because we're not actually returning any HTML yet. But let's just see. Okay, so we're running. Here comes the browser. Let's hit go. Cool. So what happened here, right? What happened here is something exploded, which we're going to ignore. But we see that it's attempting to render the main page. So somehow, when we just went to the main page, the backslash, that's what the backslash is. A single backslash just means the main page or no additional, page typed in, right? So, okay, so now we need to import a new function. That function is going to be called render template. Actually, let's not even render template yet. I think what we can do, let's return some HTML. Okay, so HTML main page, and you're like, wait, you can't use global variables. What are you doing? And the answer is, I can do whatever I want. Quiet you. Let's make the title. What should the title be? I think the title should be, hey, this worked. And then hopefully it works. The body should maybe have, this is a web page, right? And then body. That's some pretty simple HTML, nothing too complicated. So now we're going to return, HTML main page, like that. So we're just returning a string, but it's an HTML formatted string, right, with all these tags on it. So let's see what happens if we do this. I don't think I've ever, I think this should work. Let's see what happens. So I like that. Internal server error. The server encountered an internal error when it's blah, 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 blah. What actually happened was we didn't return anything from that function. So let's hit refresh. Oh, look at that. So what happened is it attempted to render the main page. It got its request, right? It was an HTTP request with a get on the backslash. And so that's why I directed here. So this is a web page. Hey, this worked, right? So that's basically how this works. And so let's keep going. Let's do something more interesting, right? That's, you might think to yourself, well, I'm an expert on web dev now. There's nothing left to do. Like, this is I think all web pages look exactly like this, right? So Yeah, I think this is definitely the best web page of 2021. But yeah, so you basically see how this thing works. And so, okay, good. I've imported render template. Yeah, exactly. It's a web page. And so now what are we going to do? I don't know. Let's do something else. So what else is good? Let's make a new one. Okay, so that'll be the main page for now. We'll update that in a little bit. So let's just say Hamburger. Okay? And def display. And so let's make a Hamburger function. So the first thing we have to do is we have to go to Google. We have to do an image search for Hamburger. And we will go to images. And then we'll save the Hamburger. Right, we'll pick this one maybe, for no reason. And then let me save that one. I'll save it. Let's see. Let me open the directory here. So we have to. I want it to be in the same directory. Let me just show an Explorer. Okay, cool. So you see, here's all the stuff. Let me just save it into here. I don't know why I picked Hamburger. I think I did it just because I've done this in previous semesters with Hamburger, so that's it. Okay, so now we have this Hamburger thing in this directory, right? So, okay, how the heck do we get this to be sent out, right? How do we get this to be sent out via a website? So the answer is that we're going to return render template, and then we're going to say Hamburger. Okay, hammy.html. Okay. Yep. So let's make a new HTML file. Let's call it hammy. Okay, there we go. So this is a hamburger. Mostly it's made bread. It's also got some cow. Okay. All right. So now let's do some stuff here. So I think we can do. How do you make an image source? Is it like this? So, yep. Okay, so let's see what happens here. All right. So I think this still won't quite work because what we need to do. I think it will work. At least it'll render the template, but it's not going to be completely happy. So let's see what's going on here. Let's pull up the, or is it Hamburger? So let's see here. Do we have to stick this in a templates directory? I think, let me check how it's structured on the, yeah, I think we have to make a templates directory. Let's make a templates directory. And then stick this into that. And then I think we have to stick this into a directory called static. And you'll see why we have to do this in just a second. So let me see if this works now. Let's restart the server. It's been a while since I've actually messed with Flask. Okay, so it sort of kind of worked, right? The title displayed, the text displayed, but the image still didn't display. So the question is, why didn't the image display? And the answer is because it tried to get the image, right? But it didn't know how to do that. So let me show you how to render images in Flask. So this is how to return images. You need another myapp.root. And then here we're actually going to do something a little bit different, because it's not just going to be a straight up like backslash or a hamburger. It's actually going to be something more like a, it's going to almost be like a variable. If you put stuff into these little angle brackets, it actually is a variable. So we're going to call it image name, like this. And then we're going to say .jpeg, right? And then we're going to get image. Okay? So based on this, it's actually going to pass this image name as an argument. Yeah, there's quite a lot of T's in there. So, so the point is that here what we can do is we can actually return send file, and then we will send the file that's in the static directory, and then we will do image name .jpeg. And then here you can say, I think this is necessary, equals image, like that. And so of course it's going to yell at you because it's like, hey, wait, what is send file? And so what you have to do is you have to import send file as well. And so that should fix it. Code injection. Yeah, sure. I guess we could do something like that. So, yeah, so let's see if this works. No, it doesn't. Why doesn't it like it? There's some problem here. Sorry. This needs to, there's a slash that I missed. It really, look how it hated that. It really did not like that at all. So anyway, there we go. Now we are displaying a hamburger, right? So you see that what happened was when we typed in \hamburger, what it wanted to do was it wanted to get the thing that was listed under hammy.html. It resent that. And then Hammy, right, if we look at the view page source, Hammy here has this image source hamburger.jpg. And so the thing is that was a separate request, right? Like the first request was, I want to see whatever's at this link, or was it whatever's at this URL, I guess is the right way to say it, which is actually the right way to say it. We want to see whatever's at this URL, which stands for Uniform Resource Locator, which you don't have to really care about. It's just somewhere on the internet. Yeah, it's a. I mean, I think that the image improves the website by a factor of like at least 100. Yeah, we can do a little Bobby Tables moment. So basically, this is a cool little thing, right? So you say, nice, I like this. But you see, and just to say it one last time, the real image here, or the real issue here, is that the image is it's a separate request, and that's why it didn't display until we had this little bit of code here. So the cool part is that once you have this little bit of code, you actually don't need to think about it all that much. You can actually kind of, hate to say it, like the way that you really code a lot of this stuff is you just kind of take this part of the code and then you just reuse it whenever you need another. Say you're going to return some other file type or whatever, then you can just use the same thing. Now keep in mind that the things that this type of Flask website does not give you, it doesn't give you anything that's like, what should I say? It doesn't give you any kind of security or logins or anything like that. So basically anyone who goes and types in any JPEG can just immediately get that JPEG. So even if, for instance, there's not a link to it, so let's find another JPEG that's just out there in the universe. Like, what's a good JPEG? Here's a JPEG, right? So let's save the JPEG to the same place. Let's put it in static, and let's call it jpeg.jpg, right? So I've saved a file called jpeg.jpg. You see that it's right here, jpeg.jpg. And I think that if I do this, it will actually access it. So I think that if what I do is I do something like this and I say jpeg.jpg, I've just accessed that file, right? And that file, I'm not accessing it through my local computer, right? This is going through 127.0.0.1, which is actually going through the server. So the server is just going to give you any JPEG that's in the directory if someone asks for it. So it's a little bit of a security problem, but whatever. Okay. There are modules that you can also, so there's additional things that you can import into Flask, which will allow you to, fix that problem. You can have logins and, cookies and stuff like that. Okay. So the next objective here is, let's do something different than states. I always do states. Let's list all the elements on the periodic table of elements, okay? So our new objective, right, new goal is to list all of the elements from the periodic table, okay? And so we are lazy. Laxy, we are lazy. We don't want to type all of them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make a little template. Let's make an HTML template, and let's call it periodic. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to use a for loop. And so here's how we're going to do it. We're going to say, here is the periodic table. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, and this might seem a little odd because anyone who knows HTML is going to say, wait, this isn't HTML. And the secret is, you're right, it's not HTML, but it is a special language called, what is it called? I forget now. It's a special markup language that, I was going to say it's called Django, but it's not called Django. It's something similar, though. So it's for element in periodic table, right? And then, so you notice that it has this curly brace %, and then curly brace %. The reason why we have this is because when we do the render template, it's going to actually take this stuff out. So what we're going to see in our page source is that this is actually not going to occur in our page source. And so I don't know if you know what the UL tag is, but the UL tag is just something that's going to make a list. And then every time, so li is just a list element. And then here we're going to do something. This is a little bit odd because you might think, well, most times in most programming languages you don't have to do this. But remember that because we're in this weird scripting language, we have to do an end for. And the reason why we have to do that is because when it looks at this tag, it says, oh, there's a for loop that we're going to start, but we don't know how long the for loop is going to go for because it's not like it's not like you can trust the tabbing or anything. You really can't trust anything that happens in between here and this end for, right? Because whatever it is, it's going to be HTML, it could be JavaScript, it could be whatever it is, but it's definitely not going to be friendly to you. So, and so here what we're going to do is we're just going to say element, like this. So you notice that these curly braces are going to get replaced. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to say for element in periodic table, let's just make a list element that is that element, and then end for. Okay. So let's make a file. That file is going to be called periodic table.txt. And then let's find all the elements, right? So elements from the periodic table. Let's hope I can find a good list that's nice and kind of in a list. And the answer is yes, I did, right? So here's the thing that I found. It's alphabetized. Okay. let's open it up into, let's open it up in a new CSV file like this. And the reason why I like to use a CSV file is because it does, or OpenOffice is that it does the nice, I guess Excel would do the same thing. It does this nice kind of, is zirconium ZR? I think I didn't copy paste it. Zirconium is ZR, right? Yeah. And it's atomic number 40. Not that we need any of that. Let's just delete all this other stuff. Okay. So the first thing let's do is let's copy paste the elements into a file like this. Okay? So I guess there's only 119 that are named. I mean, I guess the other ones are just kind of unnamed currently. So let's make a web page that displays this stuff now. So we have the web page. Okay. So how are we going to display this, right? So let's make a new root, right? So let's say periodic. Well, so I think am I wrong? Yeah, I guess 118 is the last, or yeah, I guess 118 is the last one. So maybe is there an issue with this text file? Is there like an extra line somewhere? Not sure. Huh. Wait, Tennessee. Is that one of the Tennessee is 117. Okay. Interesting. I guess the question is we'll have to find the one that's not actually an element, or if there's an extra line or something like that. I'm a little confused because it looks like everything is more or less correct, but I don't know, maybe there's an extra one here. Anyway, so for periodic, what we're going to do is we're going to display periodic.html. And so then here's the thing. What we need to do is we need to specify, right, the variable that needs to be displayed. So you notice in the HTML file, it makes reference to this kind of random variable, periodic table, right? And so the answer here is that when we do the render template, it's actually going to take periodic table and run this for loop with that variable. So what we have to do is we have to specify that variable inside of here. So let's do that. Yes, let's do that. So here what we're going to do is we're going to say periodic table equals what? And so first what we have to do is we have to do open, and maybe I'll use the with command now because we're past the point of caring. Periodic table.text as periodic file. And then what we'll do is we'll say, good question. What do we say? I guess we can say periodic table, or the table, is equal to, say, periodic file dot read dot split. I think that's the easiest way to do it. That way we'll have something if it doesn't go. And then we'll say the table, right? Oops. So let's see if this works, right? So let's rerun our server. And oops, what have I done? What have I done? View function. Oh, because I'm dumb. You see how here I have display hamburger and here I have display hamburger. Here we have to be like display periodic table, right? We just need a different function. Okay, let's try again. That was just a Python error. That wasn't even a Flask error. Okay, so let's go and just check to make sure that the hamburger page works, because that's really I mean, in the end, isn't that the most important page? Yeah, so here's our Hamburger page. And now let's go to periodic. And you see here, here's our little list, right? Our list of elements is all spelled out here, right? And you might be thinking to yourself, wow, so you don't actually need to say the R with the command, because open is simply, open always opens by default with the read. Okay. So this is a pretty cool little thing, right? Because if we look at the page source here, right, and you notice I'm like looking at page source a lot, and the reason why I'm looking at page source here is you look at this and you scroll down and you say, wait a second, there's no for loop in here anymore. This has all literally been replaced with the actual things. And so you notice that what happens is that this periodic HTML file is this for loop actually gets replaced, totally replaced on the client side. So the server gets to see this for loop. The client only gets to see the result, right? And in a way that's good, because sometimes you don't really want your client end to see it's the old saying about, politics or whatever. It's like no one wants to see how or making laws is like making sausage kind of quote, right? You don't want to see how it gets made. And so the answer is that it's exactly the same here, right? We don't want the end user to be able to see what we're doing behind the scenes. We want them to think that, hey, like this is just a really simple web page. And so the vast majority of sites that you visit are rendered with this kind of template, right? Like when you go to YouTube, there's probably some like for video in recommended videos, right? And then it doesn't just output the name of it or whatever. It actually displays the title, gets the image, all that stuff. And that's how all of those websites work, right? Because what they're doing is they're actually saying, okay, like we're going to go through this list and generate, say, the recommended videos, and then we'll generate this title bar, and then we'll generate this stuff, and then we'll stick 800,000 ads in it, right? Because that's how the internet is. It's always funny when I look at the internet without a web blocker or an ad blocker. I hardly even recognize the internet anymore. It's a crazy place. So, okay, so that's cool. Here's some templating. These are called templates. Let me look it up. I'm trying to find out what the language is called. I forget. Jinja. See, it's so much like Django. So if you're wondering what this language is, it's actually called Jinja or Jinja 2. Okay? That's what the language is called. All right? So that's why I was thinking Django, because it sounds so similar. So Django, the web server, uses Jinja, and so does Flask, and it's all very confusing. So if you ever see like Jinja or Jinja 2, just know that that's part of Flask and Django. It's its own language, but it's let's see. Let's just read what they say about themselves, right? They say Jinja is a modern and designer-friendly templating language for Python, modeled after Django's templates. So Django has its own templates, but you can also select that Django uses Jinja, and Flask uses it, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's basically a whole bunch of interdependent names, and you'll get used to, if you ever do web development for a career, I am 100% certain that you will get used to just hearing all these names that might seem a little bit arbitrary. The answer is the names don't really mean anything, right? Flask versus Django versus Jinja, they don't mean anything. You just have to know what they are, right? Okay. So let's do one last example. So I think this is we've got a pretty good website here, right? So, let's do another thing where this time what we're going to do is we're actually going to get some user input, okay? And we can do what Michal wants. Get input, right? And def get some user input, right? If I can type a colon without accidentally hitting the whatchamacallit. So let's get some user input. Well, I mean, so there are reasons to use Flask over Django. There are reasons to use Django over the Flask. I mean, I would say that Django is kind of like the built-in, everything is together kind of thing. Flask is like the bare bones, everything is kind of put in its own little part. So let's say get user form, right, .html, and so I'm going to show you some stuff. So let's find the I need to find my code. Let's see. Here's the form example. Okay. So I'm going to type some stuff. The point is that most of the time you're going to end up... okay, maybe I'm not going to type some stuff. There we go. And now we're going to make a little table. And then we're going to say tr. I really can't get this to work, can I? Can't type. We're going to copy paste this. And then, yeah, I think we'll do what I did last semester. It's, what is your name? Right? And then here we're going to have, next to it, we're going to have an input where the type of the input is equal to text. That'll make it an edit box. And then the name of the input is equal to username. Let's say that. And then here, let's do it again. What is your quest? And then we'll do another input. So quest. And then maybe we'll do what is your favorite I don't know, food. Fave food. Okay? So you don't have to worry about the table too much, or the TRs, the TDs. Really, that's actually just trying to, favorite color, favorite food, whatever. Well, we can do favorite color, this, maybe favorite movie, because people have favorite movies too, right? So, so let's do fave movie, fave food, fave color. And so, we're getting pretty close to, we're not actually going to do a code injection. I'm just going to kind of show you the dangers of not sanitizing your input, or not making sure that your input is properly checked before you just randomly shove it into a string or a database or something like that. Okay, so let's see. I think this is good. So let's. I think this is all we need, right? I could be wrong. Oh, right. So now we need some responses. So let's do the responses. Let's put them in a table. So we're going to actually have for answer in answers. And of course, now we have to specify what answers are. And we'll have to do an end for, like this. It's kind of annoying, right? Because this is the Jinja macro, whatever you want to call it, script language thing. And this is the tag that tells you to enter Jinja and exit Jinja. So, and then let's see, tr, td, This is actually like table row, and then I don't know what D stands for, but it's like table entry. And then we could just say answer. Yeah, let's just do that. Okay. All right, so let's see what happens when we render this thing. Yeah, I actually don't know what it stands for because I'm not a big guy on HTML. I just what does TD stand for? HTML. Table data. So TR is table row and TD is table data. That's actually a good guess, right or down. That's because it does go right or down. And that's not a terrible guess. I think it is table data though. Doesn't really matter. Again, I have lived, a long portion of my life never actually wondering what that meant because I don't really care about HTML that much. So let's render it now. Let's go to our little Flask server, right? And so let's render template. And we'll render the template. The template is user form.html, and answers equals, let's just make it equal to an empty list right now. That way we can see what happens. So let's rerun our server. And I should probably have been able to guess that it meant table data, but I guess that's hindsight is 2020. I just didn't really think about it. So yeah, we go to get input, right? So what is your name? My name is Eric. What is your quest? Teach 201 and terrify students. What's my favorite color? My favorite color currently is blue for the next 2 or 3 seconds. What's my favorite food? I guess sushi. What's my favorite movie? I went on Starship Troopers recently. And so now what we can do is as it turns out, there's no button to submit, so that was a problem. We need an input button. That was stupid. So actually, this is a good opportunity to show you this. So let me show you this. If we add an input button, so type is equal to submit, and so what this means is that it's going to submit all this stuff that's encapsulated in this form. And so let me show you what happens. And so notice that we don't actually have to rerun the server. Okay, no, never mind. We do have to rerun the server. So sometimes you don't have to rerun the server because it's going to... okay, so let's do this now. There we go. Nice. Okay, actually, we didn't even have to... So now let's submit our answers. Method not allowed. So what happened here, right? What happened here is that there's 2 HTTP types of... There's actually more than that, but for our purposes, there's really 2 HTTP requests. There's a GET request, which is basically like, hey, server, give me whatever I want. And then there's the POST request, right? And POST is like a little bit of additional stuff. So POST is like GET, where a server can send a response, but the server can also get some data from the user. So POST allows data to be sent back. So notice that in our Flask server we have this, but actually what we need is, and of course there's no reason for you to know any of this, right? So the whole point is like, you should, when I type something in like this, you should be like, well, that's pretty random. And the answer is yes, it is pretty random. Yeah, so get is, getting something. POST is, here's something, server. Make what of it you will. And so methods equals get and POST. So you saw that this basically said method not allowed, and the reason why it says method not allowed is because the, what should I say? Yeah, basically the reason why is because the POST method was not allowed in their methods. By default, the thing that's allowed is get. POST is not by default allowed. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to say if request dot Actually, okay, so how do we get that? So we need to import request. Okay, so what this is going to allow us to do is this little request object is going to allow us to say, if the request, now, if I had built Flask, I would have actually made request one of the arguments, and you would just have to have it in every single one. But that's not how they built it. They built it so that it's like its own separate thing. It's a little bit weird. But if the request method is post, then what we're going to do is we're going to say the name is equal to, or yeah, our name is equal to request.form.get. And then at this point, what we have to do is use the same name as we used here. So here it's going to be username, quest, and then fave color, fave food, fave movie. So there we go. What's the next one? I forget. Fave color equals fave movie equals fave food equals, I forget, oh yeah, quest. The quest equals request.form.get, and so here it's going to be quest, fave color, fave movie, fave food, like that. Yeah, as it turns out, I can't really remember things from like moment to moment. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to stick all of this stuff into a list like this. I mean, this is not going to be the most entertaining website. Remember, like, all of this stuff is very basic, but the reason why I'm kind of doing this is just because I think that once you see all of the basics, you can, if you have an idea for something you actually want to make, you can use these little snippets of code as a kind of, I don't know, as a kind of like basis to, I mean, you can do way more interesting looking things with the code that is basically this simple. So that's the point. Okay, so let's rerun the server, and hopefully it doesn't just crash or whatever. So let's try it again. So let's do, yeah, well, I want to, yeah, let's do get input. My name is, what is my name? Sammy. Here we are. That's my quest to Roy. Eric. That's my favorite color. I'm guessing red. Favorite food, pizza. Because that's all I feed. That's all the TAs get to eat. They only get to eat pizza. And favorite movie. Favorite movie. What is Sammy's favorite movie? Hard to say. But I gotta answer it before they tell me. So it's going to be a SpongeBob movie. Nope, that's your favorite movie. You can't change it now. You're done. That's it. No more. No choice. All right, so I'm going to click the button and see what happens. Cool, right? So then if we do, like, another person, if we say, you know, and Roberto's purpose is to stab Bender, because they're in Futurama. He likes orange, because he is orange. Does he have a favorite food? Not sure. What is Roberto's favorite movie? I don't know. And so yeah, there we go. Right. So that's a pretty cool thing. I guess oil is, yeah, that's right. Oh, you know, but the robots drink alcohol, so I guess it'd be like you know, whiskey, right? Something like that. Anyway, the point is that that this is a little bit of a tutorial on HTML. It's a little bit of a tutorial on Flask. Basically it's a little bit of a flavor of everything, right? So Python allows you to do a lot of stuff that we did not teach in this course, and this is one of those things. And I think it's kind of cool, and I think that it's one of the reasons that Python is... So if you think, like, from what you know about Python in this class, and you ask yourself the question, like, is Python a useful language? The answer would be like, well, I'm not really sure, because it's possible that Python could be useful, but it's also possible that no one uses Python and it's just here for teaching. So the answer is that actually Python is pretty industry standard now. You have a lot of people out there in industry using Python, and that's that, right? Okay, so I think that's it that I have for Flask today. I mean, I'll upload all this to the GitHub, and you can play with Flask and do all of this stuff. So let's upload all of this, right? Git commit. Yeah, I'm sorry we didn't quite get to code injection. Maybe I'll do a little bit of that next time. But we did run out of time, and I'm 3 minutes over, and everyone's going to complain. Actually, people don't complain, but they just kind of leave. So, all right, cool. Okay, so the other reason why this is a good tutorial is that it kind of teaches you how everything needs to be structured, right? Because Flask is very directory specific. Okay, I think that's it. Can't think of... I mean, I can think of a lot of other things. We didn't get to all the stuff. But, yeah. All right. I think that's all for today. I will sign off now. If I can find the outro. I found it.